Welcome along to another edition of In Focus. I'm Marcus Stead, and in this episode I'm joined by Jeremy Jacobs, a familiar voice to radio listeners in southern England in particular. He's worked as a football reporter for Capital Gold Sportstime, remember that, BBC London and BBC Kent, as well as having read sports bulletins on a range of commercial radio stations. Jeremy is also a widely respected conference and events host. Sales is another of his passions, and we'll be talking about his current work in that industry a little bit later on. This really is a wide-ranging discussion. We begin by looking at the impact of the coronavirus, particularly within the M25, where Jeremy lives and works, see what impact it's having on the NHS and on the economy. We look at the effect it's having on small and medium-sized businesses. We ask whether enough is being done by the government to help business owners, and particularly the self-employed. A little bit later on, the discussion turns to the Football Association and their decision to suspend football and invalidate the league at the lower end of the semi-professional pyramid. Jeremy is a passionate Margate fan, and he's far from happy with the way the FA has handled the situation, and they are sentiments I share. And then towards the end of the podcast, the conversation turns to the way in which the pandemic has forced individuals and businesses to explore new ways of working, with so many of us now having to work from home. And we assess whether this will have a long-term impact in the way we work. Will offices need so much office space in the future when they realise that a lot of work can be done from home? And with things like Skype and Zoom and everything like that, do we really need big offices anymore? And then finally, we look at the ever-changing world of sales, and we discuss how Jeremy is adapting to a rapidly evolving environment. This really is a fascinating discussion. Do please stay with us. Well, I'm delighted to be joined today by former football commentator, broadcaster extraordinaire, former conference host, still does a little bit of that, and sales specialist. We'll talk about that in a moment, Jeremy Jacobs. Jeremy, how are you keeping under the circumstances?
Oh, I'm pretty good, actually, Marcus. Although I'm inside the M25, I live in a London postal district. So I'm looking out onto some stables and some trees. And, when the sun's out, it's lovely here. So I'm very lucky to be in that part of London where there's a lot of greenery. So it's pretty nice being here. And it's nice to be woken up. Even when the traffic is here under normal circumstances, you do get a lot of bird song first thing in the morning. So it's quite good.
You've got the best of both worlds then. You've got lots of greenery, lots of nature around you, but you're also not too far from the metropolis of London and the busyness when you want to be a part of that world as well.
Absolutely spot on, yeah.
You're in a great location. So we're into week number, 2.5, I think, now of the lockdown. And life is very different for all of us at the moment. How have you been coping the last few weeks?
Well, as I say to some of my clients professionally, what you have to do is look, you just have to be a bit resolute and say, right, okay, treat each day like a normal working day, Monday to Friday. I think the most important thing, Marcus, is to have a schedule and just pretend you're doing work. Now, it's very hard working at home, but if you just sit, if you're disciplined, say, right, for an hour and a half, I'm going to read, hour and a half, I'm going to research, and then in the afternoon, I've got 2 or 3 hours telephone calls. Nowadays with Zoom or Skype, you can set up meetings, and it's probably much easier to set up meetings because people's diaries are probably quite empty at the moment. So from a professional point of view, it's really important that you, I think as anybody in business, is to give of yourself, give of your time and say, look, and keep in touch with people and say, look, this isn't going to last forever, but in the meantime, is there anything else I can do to help? How are you feeling? Is there anything else I can do for you? And just try and help out people as if you would a neighbour. And I think if you do that as a consultant or a supplier or a manufacturer or anybody really in business, it'll serve you well, going forward.
I think we've got to count our blessings and look at the positives, try and see the positives in this very difficult situation. And I think one of the great ways in which we are fortunate at the moment is that if this situation had struck 10, certainly 20 years ago, we wouldn't have had the Skypes or the Zooms, and keeping in contact and communicating not just with our business partners, but with vulnerable members of our family and vulnerable members of society would have been far harder. Now, one of the great things that's happened is I've been nagging my own mother, who's 66, for many years, saying you must learn how to use a computer properly, you must learn how to use Zoom and Skype, because one day, you might be more frail and you can't get out so easily. And to her credit, she has learned how to use Skype extensively in the last couple of weeks. I talked her through it on the phone, and eventually we got there. She's now absolutely loving it. She's keeping in touch with me. She's keeping in touch with close friends of hers in Kent, who she goes on holiday with twice a year. And it's I think we've got to count our blessings in that sense. And I think when we come out of this, one thing we should say to people who are maybe 60, 70, even 80 years of age, for crying out loud, do your best to familiarize yourself with technology, because if there are issues with mobility or you can't get out and about, this will keep you in touch with the world. It will keep you in touch with your loved ones. It'll boost your morale and it'll make you more independent.
Yes, definitely. No, it's just horrendous. I mean, the people as I mentioned to you before, off air, I have an elderly mother. She has carers, which in itself is a worry. But they're professional. They're not cheap. But you know, they look after her, and you know, if she didn't have that connection, then she'll be in real trouble. And thank God they're mobile. These people, they can see her on a daily basis. So thank God we've got that. But there again, yes, how did people cope in this country during the time of the Spanish flu?
Well, that killed more people than they killed in the trenches in the First World War. That's right. It's so in a historical context, we have been here before, just not in living memory for any of us. So looking at it from a London context, I mean, I can look out of my window right now and I can see Cardiff Bay, and I've got the link bridge looking out of my window, linking the two sides of Cardiff Bay, and it's a dual carriageway, very busy road at most of the time. I'm looking out there now. I can just see one van passing as I say this. It is deadly quiet out there. I would say traffic is, even at rush hour, morning and evening rush hour, is 80 or 90% down on where it would normally be on a day like this.
We'll have to call it something else, Marcus. As a rush hour, you know.
Yeah, it is anything but a rush at the moment. But from a
more a mosey, but go on,
yeah, indeed. Well, from a London point of view, then we're seeing images on the news of people are travelling. Even as recently as last week, I haven't seen it so much this week. People packed like sardines onto tube trains, like it would be under any other circumstance. And I think there's a problem here. Now, you've outlined correctly what an essential worker is. Your mother needs to be cared for. We need doctors and nurses in hospitals. We need cleaners in hospitals. There are certain things that simply can't wait, people working in various emergency services. But I think we got a problem here, and I'm going to say something controversial now. I think there is a certain type of Londoner who, because they work in the city, so to speak, in finance or whatever, is considering themselves an essential worker, when really they're not, and they are taking unnecessary risks by travelling on packed tube trains, morning and evening rush hour, spreading the virus, potentially, and they're taking unnecessary risk. And I think what we need to do is prick their egos a little bit and think, hang on now, this is the 21st century. Can you do your job from home? And if you can't do your job from home, which you probably can do your job from home, but if you can't, do you really need to do it at this moment in time?
I think that's an excellent question. I think you have a point, and I think it's not so much the employees going in and thinking they're key workers, it's their employers. And a lot of employers have come under a lot of criticism in recent times for either not organising home working or not properly, and asking people to come in. And I think that's completely wrong. I fear that there'll be a further crackdown by the government, and they'll say, right, everything will be stopped. Everything. And they'll stop all car journeys, and they'll stop all trains. I understand National Express have stopped their coach journeys now.
They have.
I mean, this is horrendous, really, in many respects. But if you don't need to travel, then why lay on the transport? Now, you know, the Mayor of London, who I'm not a great supporter of, is really, you know, caught between a rock and a hard place, isn't he? You know, you've got to have key workers coming in. But I think they've reduced the tube service to such an extent that you get these scenes of people packing on the trains. There was a picture or some video from, I think, East Acton or one of the Acton tube lines. I mean, it's horrendous, and you can't. It's completely wrong to do that. Or equally as wrong is to have the situation where you have planes coming into this country from the United States and elsewhere still, and people are coming off those planes and they're not being checks. whereas in other countries they've got to go for 14 days quarantine.
This is very important.
Why aren't we doing that? I don't understand it.
You make a very important point there, because, okay, we're told to take very, very sensible precautions. As you say, don't travel unless you absolutely have to. And meanwhile, at Heathrow, at Gatwick, and in the smaller airports as well, you've got planes arriving from China, from Italy, and there are no checks being made on these people. And I think that is utterly absurd. We're hearing today, mind you, that as of next week, we're down to just one runway at Heathrow, which does suggest that they're expecting us to be in this situation for some considerable time. But I've got family in northern Italy, and we know from what we see on the news that Italy and Spain, in terms of in a European context, have been the countries most heavily impacted so far. That the figures from Italy are absolutely horrendous at the moment. And by the way, for the conspiracy theorists out there who are saying it's just another strain of flu, please go and ask any doctor or nurse in an Italian hospital and ask them if this is a normal early April day. It is not. It is horrendous. They are having to make decisions in regards to ventilators. There are only so many ventilators and so many doctors and so many nurses to treat people. They are having to make life or death decisions. If an 80-year-old is come in and there's a 20 or a 30-year-old who needs treatment, they are having to make some pretty damn brutal choices. If you're a conspiracy theorist and you're reading all the wacko stuff we're seeing on social media, just ask a doctor or a nurse in northern Italy, is this a normal April day? And I can tell you it absolutely is not. And we're even seeing in this country now, okay, I've got a routine ear, nose and throat matter where I have a 6-monthly hospital appointment. My appointment's not due until June, and it's an outpatient thing. It's quite an easy thing to treat, but it's important I'm seen. I had a letter the other day. My outpatient appointment in June has been cancelled, and all they said at the bottom was, we will reschedule. We will let you know when something becomes available. They didn't even tell me when it's going to be. Now, I can live with that. But there are people now, a lot of very worried people with cancer, people who've had cancer operations cancelled. The knock-on effects of this, both inside and outside London, are absolutely enormous in that sense.
Yeah, and so why create a more of a problem with this Heathrow business and the tube problem? I fear we will have an Italy situation. All right, the demographics are different, as you know yourself. The family structures are different in Italy. There's more contact across the generations, isn't there? And they're more into sort of hugging and kissing, whereas the restrained British don't do that. Whether that's just a patronising term or whether there are other reasons, one doesn't know. Why is it the Germans don't have a death rate as good as ours? Perhaps it's to do with their fitness and their love of the outdoor life. The Germans, I don't know. Hopefully, we will end up. My biggest concern, Mark, is we're not going to go along for 2 or 3 months or 4 months, and then we'll wake up on a Monday morning. Okay, guys, it's all over. There's going to be a series of stop and start, and this could go on for a year or two, and that's what concerns me. And the concern there is, well, who is going to be allowed out?
Well,
what's the next
interesting debate? This is an interesting debate point, because Singapore, I don't know how well you know Singapore, but
yes, I haven't been for some years, but it's a good place.
Yeah, it certainly is a very advanced country, very well-educated population. You've got a diverse mix of races and faiths living there. But by definition, it's a small island state. And they went into a state of lockdown, I think it was in late January. And they tried coming out of it some weeks ago, week before last. Last Saturday, they had a second wave of cases, because as they gradually started to lift the restrictions and they tried to get life in some form of normality, people went out and about. And I think there were 80-odd cases last Saturday alone. That was a second wave. Now, bearing in mind, Singapore's climate is a humid climate and a hot climate, and they say the virus cannot survive outside. It cannot survive as well in warmer climates. The fact that they had 80 more cases on a single day when they just eased off a little bit suggests we could be in it for some time. And there was something, BBC News, and I know you're not a big fan of some of the reporting on the BBC either, to put it mildly, but there was something terrible on last night's news where they were saying about the antibody test, which there's one of 2 tests that's being proposed at the moment. Now, the things I don't understand about this are, okay, you're a nurse or a doctor, you have the antibody test, and it says, okay, you had the virus 2 months ago. The BBC News report last night was working on the assumption that if you've had it, you cannot have it again. And the scientific evidence simply does not back that up. We do not know whether it buys you 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, or a lifetime's immunity, or possibly at the other end of the spectrum, no immunity at all. We don't know the answer. So with that in mind, what is the value of this test? And also, even if those assumptions are correct, and they may well not be correct, that it buys you a period of immunity, you think, okay, hunky-dory, off I go to work. I'm on the bus, I'm on the train, I've touched the surface, it's on my clothing. Okay, we don't know how long it can survive outside the body, but even you could touch something like a hospital railing or something when you're there and pass it on to somebody. It's too many assumptions are being made about the value of these tests. And I think particularly in a densely populated area like London, we talked about what goes on the densely packed tube trains. We cannot make assumptions about this.
No, I agree. And as I said, this could roll on for a year or two quite easily. And the worry is, I don't want to be too dramatic, we could lose lots of people who are our nearest and dearest. And you've got to, I think, back of my mind, you just got to be aware for that. And I'm not talking about my elderly mother necessarily. I'm talking about people of your age or my age. You can it's horrendous.
Yeah.
And I think there are too many people taking it lightly, and this is why I think there's going to be a further crackdown.
Well, the thing is, we're seeing, and I don't know whether you listened to the coronavirus podcast I recorded with Greg Lance Watkins over the weekend, but I told a story there, and I'll repeat it now for those who haven't heard it and for your benefit. On the 2nd of January this year, James Easton, who works with us at Talk Podcasts, he came to visit me in Cardiff. It was a flying visit, very last minute. And he wanted to go and see the Swansea City versus Charlton match at the Liberty Stadium because he's a huge Charlton Athletic fan, and Worthing is his big non-league passion. We'll come on to the impact of non-league football a bit later on, perhaps. But he said to me, "Oh, can I stay at your flat?" I said, "Yes, certainly." And he said, "Do you want a ticket to the match?" And I said, "Yeah, okay." And we got on a train, had a few beers, went to Swansea, takes about an hour, arrived at the Liberty Stadium, and we were at the away end of the grounds, and we had a pint in the bar at the away end before it started. And he pointed out someone to me. He said, "You see that young man over there?" And the young man looked about my age. And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "He hasn't missed a single Charlton Athletic game for 22 years. And I said, "Wow, that's some record." That young man, his name was Seb Lewis, and on Wednesday of last week, he died of coronavirus at the age of just 38. He was 2 years older than I am. And the message, Seb was a character. He was a very eccentric man. He was on the autistic spectrum, we believe, but he was passionate through and through about Charlton Athletic. That was his big passion in life. And, he could really have looked forward to another 40, maybe even 50 years of life, maybe beyond that, who knows? But he was taken from us at 38. And what I'm saying to people is that, predominantly, statistically, it's much more dangerous for the elderly, but for crying out loud, it's not just the elderly who are being affected by this.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there may have been some underlying thing. He may have a very weak immunity system, but that's not the point. It's tragic. And I did see that story actually. Yes, I think it was on Facebook. And I mean, yes, there are people that my sort of non-league passion of and you think it could strike any one of those guys who I know. And we just got to pray that this thing might just go away. As the year rolls on. I mean, second and third and fourth waves frightens the life out of me.
Well, it's the same here, but unfortunately, the evidence from Singapore suggests that there is a second wave. I don't think we can believe the statistics that come out of China, so I'm not even going to go down that road at the moment.
Yeah.
But in terms of poor old Seb Lewis, or poor young Seb Lewis, more to the point, the big thing there, he did have asthma. But again, you think asthma is one of those things that can be managed, and for the most part, it can. Combine it with the coronavirus, and it's got something else. And it makes me wonder, people with weakened immune systems for one reason or another. It is a very, very concerning time, and we cannot take any chances with this. We have got to listen to the official advice. But of course, in a London context, and we see, don't we, the impact this is having on small and medium-sized businesses as well. I knew that when we shut down all across the United Kingdom 2 Fridays ago, the pubs, the bars, the restaurants, the cafes, the little cafes of one sort or another, I knew straight away a lot of those businesses will not reopen. because it's like, I'll give one example. I know of a snooker club owner in the, I'll tell you who it is, he won't mind me saying. It's Darren Morgan, the former world number 8 snooker player. And he's got a snooker club in Cross Keys in the Welsh Valleys. And a lot of very good young players who've gone on to better things started their journey, if you like, there. Now, Darren's parents opened that club in 1983. Both of his parents died within a few months of each other in the late 1990s. Darren has run that club ever since. And in recent years, well, more than recent years, he's had his property business as a source of income. He's also got Darren Morgan Sports, which makes trophies and is a local school uniform supplier to schools in the local area. And Darren has sort of run the snooker club just about breaking even, or maybe at a bit of a loss, subsidizing it, because he really wants to remain involved in snooker. Yeah. Now, you'll know this because it's the same all over the United Kingdom, the sheer number of snooker clubs that have closed in the last 15 years due to various pressures that have been put on them, whether it's the smoking ban, change in social habits, business rates, you name it. Darren put up a notice on the Friday night when the Prime Minister ordered all these venues to close, saying if this goes on for more than a month, I'm afraid this will be the straw that breaks the camel's back. We will not be reopening. Now, that's just one simple example of a community facility that will be lost, and an important one because it kept kids off the street. There was coaching available. They could learn to play the game well, and some of them have gone on to good things in the game. Some very good young players, as I say. You think now the number of little cafes, restaurants, people who've worked their backsides off creating small businesses in the last few years, they could potentially lose everything in the months ahead. And I know that Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, announced this £300 billion package to stimulate the economy. By the way, all of that will have to be paid back sooner or later. But also the other stuff he announced, like 80% of people who've been temporarily laid off, 80% of their wages rather will be paid. And then the help for the self-employed. This is an interesting point, and I'd like you to address it, please. He announced this package of help for the self-employed. I think there are a number of problems here. The biggest one of all, we'll talk more details in a minute, the biggest one of all, no money coming in until June.
Yeah, it's hideous, isn't it? Yeah, it's. I think they're going to have to do something else. But governments are notoriously bad at spending money, and whether it's through distribution or something, they're just not very good at doing it. Unless you have an authoritarian system like North Korea or China or one or two other places I could no doubt mention. In liberal democracies, governments are not very good at being authoritarian. It's just not why they're there.
Well, we see, don't we? Every project, whether it's in London, you've got HS2 and projects like that. They always come in late and massively over budget. Every time. Right,
yeah. That's another story. But yeah, and I think I was reading, I forget, one of the Sky business journalists wrote something. I forget his name now, and he says we may need another Bretton Woods. As in 1944, it may be this has weakened international institutions so much that there may not a new. He said didn't say a new world order. He said, but it may be that we need to spruce up the United Nations or make a difference to the World Trade Organization or the World Health Organization or something. I've been a bit disappointed with the World Health Organization. I think they should. They've been a bit of a toothless tiger, really. I think he says in his article, and who should be the disease stopper of last resort and not nation states, and they're not, and they haven't done that role. They left it up to individual states to do things, and I think we've been found wanting in this country. But there's no point blaming the Prime Minister or the Conservative government. You just got to go. We are where we are, and we've got to do our best.
Yeah, even now, despite the errors that have been made, and by the way, I do question the value of these 5 p.m. daily briefings now, because I think they're running out of steam, to be honest. And I think there's just far too much speculation. And also the lobby journalists who are asking questions. There's this silly game of one-upmanship where they're either asking questions that have already been answered or just trying to make themselves look tough for images on the evening news when they ask their questions. There's a lot of very silly questions being asked at that. So I question the value of that, certainly. Yeah. But going back to this point about the self-employed, I think it would have been better all round if Rishi Sunak had said, look, there's no easy way of helping the self-employed because it's such a complex system and a very complex economy we live in that sense. The best thing he could have done as a short-term measure is say, right, there's going to be a flat rate for anyone who's self-employed, just enough for you to buy your food and pay your utility bills. Won't be much left over beyond that. But in terms of what he said is, we're going to look at your 3 years worth of your HMRC records and work out an aggregate amount. Big problem there is, point one, if you became self-employed 3 years ago and spent the first year or so building yourself up and living off your savings or getting yourself into debt.
Or first 2 years or first 3 years.
Indeed, you've got it. You can have quite long periods where it takes a good number of years to get your business going. And therefore, that's not an accurate reflection of how much you might now be making or how much you really need to get yourself by just to get yourself surviving. And the other is, and a good friend of mine, someone I've known for many, many years, is in exactly this position. He only became self-employed a matter of months ago. He didn't have a huge amount of choice in the matter, really. He became self-employed. He has not yet had to submit anything at all to HMRC. And therefore, he has fallen through the gaps completely on this. And look, I'll be honest, it's not the end of the world if I don't have any income for the next month. But to ask people to wait until June before they get anything at all, I think is pretty outrageous. I think my system, what I suggested, is a very, very basic flat rate. It won't be a fortune. A lot of people will be saying, I make a lot more than that. Well, good for you, but tough luck for the time being. Just give a very basic rate so that people don't starve and they've got enough to cover their utility bills and so forth. And point one, that could be administered much more quickly. And point two, you wouldn't need an army of staff at the HMRC offices to administer it either, many of whom will not be in work at the moment because they're self-isolating or can't get to work. And point three, people would not have to wait until June. There are many, many millions of people who cannot wait until June.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree with it. It's a real worry, and it's of course there's one or two people, commentators on Twitter, where else, have said, I've asked about, how is it now not about time for a basic monthly income for everybody? Now, I think they tried that in Finland and they stopped it. And I can see the benefits of it. I just feel, though, it sends out the wrong message. But it may be that we're now living in times where, people do need this. I think it's a disincentive to work, and I think it's not right.
Yeah, I agree with you, but that's normal circumstances. Under normal circumstances, you would be spot on. These are not normal circumstances. I am more than willing to work. Believe me, I'd rather work than not work. But if I cover various sporting events, as people know, I work for this, that, and the other. I've got a number of different employers. If those events I cover are not taking place, and beyond that, I've also got property interest as well. My tenants are not in a position to pay.
Which brings me on to another subject as well, Marcus. I mean, exactly. What do you do if you've got decent tenants and they're on a 2-year AST and it finishes in 3 months' time, and they want to? Well, they may not be able to move. How do you get the AST to be extended?
Legally they would be on a rolling contract under those circumstances. But the basic point here is, I won't name names, but one of my tenants, he's a chef, and obviously his restaurant has had to close where he's employed. He's a junior chef, and the situation there is the government will pay 80% of his wage, whatever it is. But even administering that, it hasn't happened yet. He hasn't received that money yet, as far as I'm aware. No. And I'm gonna have to email him later today about this, actually. But he can also claim housing benefit if he hasn't got much in savings. But again, how many weeks is that going to take to come through? So I'm trying very hard to work with my tenants as fair as possible. But it's not easy when the government is taking so long just to get people. And by the way, it goes beyond that. I don't know. Okay, you may receive half a month's wages before the restaurant closed down. But, he's got young children to feed as well. So all these things you've got to take into account. And I was watching on one of the news channels, RT UK, I was watching yesterday. And they had this woman on there talking down Skype. And she was, I think, a hotel/restaurant owner in Liverpool, near Anfield Football Stadium. And she said a very, very big part of her income is dependent on Premier League football. And she said that with no football, she's had to lay off her staff or temporarily suspend it, so to speak. But she said she needs this financial assistance now from the government because she's in year 2, year 3 of her business. She can't wait 3-4 months. She said that is not going to happen. And she says she's also a single mother of 3-4 children, I think she's got. She's having sleepless nights at the moment. And, she's played by the rules. She set up a business. She ran it properly. She has done everything you would expect her to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the government we've had the Cameron Osborne years into the Theresa May years, now into the Boris Johnson era. We have been encouraged after the 2008 crash, do set up a small business, do be entrepreneurial, small, medium-sized businesses. People did. People took that punt, like her and many, many others. We need a little bit of help from you now, the government. That's what I'm saying. We need the help right now. I'm afraid we can't wait 2 or 3 months, a lot of us,
No, it's frightening. On the other end of the scale, you then got to look at, all right, I'm a bit older than you, near your mother's age, but I'm looking at my so-called pension investments, and you think, I was talking to my IFA the other day, and he has, across all of his clients, about, I don't know, beginning of the year, he had like about 110 million, right?
Yeah.
That's now worth 77 million across all investment. And you think, all right, it will recover. And what the stock market does isn't necessarily what is going to happen to investments in the long term. But if this keeps on happening and there's no resolution within a year, then it's a problem. It could end up being a heck of a problem.
I think anyone who's planning on retiring in the next 10 years and is reliant on a private pension has got significant problems. But also on top of that, if you go down a route I've gone down with property, again, property...
You've also got problems.
Now, I was discussing this with somebody recently, and we were talking about. He was saying, "Oh, I'm going to lose my income through his job," and he's right. He has got problems. And he said, "Oh, it's all right for you. You've got property and so forth." I said, "Look, this is like a row of dominoes. It might hit him sooner than it hits me, but it'll hit me sooner or later, and it'll hit everyone sooner or later. It doesn't matter." Which sector you work in, sooner or later, it's going to get you. I admittedly, I'm not going to be in the first line of this. I can get by for the next month or two if I have to. It won't be very pleasant, but sooner or later it will get me. And I will need...
What happens though, Marcus, if I can cut across, what happens if your chef, junior chef, turn around to you next week and say, right, I'm not paying you, you can go, and you can't sue me? Well, you probably can in the end of I mean, what can you do? You probably won't if you've got 3 kids. But I mean, there are some dodgy tenants out there who will take advantage, and vice versa with landlords as well.
Of course, well, all evictions have now been paused. So landlords who have, I've been through this process in the past as well, though, admittedly not for the last 8 years, of having to take somebody to court to evict them. And I can tell you that before you even begin that process, they've got to be in 2 months of arrears. By the time you've actually taken them to court and waited your turn on the court list, gone through that process, and then gone through all the different stages before you get to bailiffs, you could be looking at 6 months without rent. And in fact, I did have 6 months without rent from beginning to end of that. And I didn't waste a single day. Once they were in 2 months of arrears, I began the legal process. By the time it was all over, it was 6 months. Now, there will be landlords going through that process up and down the United Kingdom right now who are on the verge of getting control of their property. Hey presto, what's happened? All evictions and eviction processes have been stopped. So that landlord who still has to pay his insurance, who still has to pay his mortgage interest, is now being hit in the pocket as well.
Which of course is another matter, mortgage interest. Section 24. But anyway, I don't want to start going on about that. But I think, look, hope is not a strategy, but I am hopeful that it will sort itself out. And but yes, there could be a lot of pain in a lot of sectors.
And I think the government needs to show a lot more urgency in dealing with this. I think that's the basic point. People are hurting now. People have got bills to pay now. People have got families to feed now. That's the basic. We cannot wait until June, and something needs to happen very, very quickly here. So that's where we are with things there. Let's talk a little bit now about, because we come towards the end of this discussion, a bit about non-league football. And,
yes.
You're a big Margate fan.
Yes.
My links to Worthing Football Club are well known. And they, of course, top of the Isthmian League at the moment. The FA's decision to null and void the league, I think, is absolutely outrageous. And we're talking everything below National League level, aren't we?
Yes. Okay. I'm trying to think how far this pyramid goes down. But yes, I mean, Margate and Worthing are in step 3 of the non-league. So, but 5 and 6 were postponed. I believe there are. I think there are leagues 7 and 8 beyond that, or step 7 and 8. I'll have to double check. But the point is, yes, all senior football, as you and I know it, is. But now I understand their decision, and it may be, let's get these guys out of the way and we can start worrying about the more important stuff. I think a lot of it has got to do with money and players' contracts, and I think when you get into the National League, there are issues there. But I think again, we would all prefer to see that the leagues be suspended. Now in Belgium, they've done something different. They may not have the number of clubs, but I think it's going to cause a lot of problems. Now I don't know what's happening in Scotland, or I don't know what's happening with the League of Wales. Have they got their own rules?
They're indefinitely suspended now for the whole of April. I don't think an announcement has come through. I may be wrong about that. Something may have happened in the last few days that I missed, but I don't. I think realistically, look, they haven't. I don't think there's been an FA style announcement like there has been in England.
Sure.
But the problem you've got here, the problem you've got here is that there's not a fair way of doing it unless everyone's played each other twice, home and away, because your fixture list might be kinder than another club's fixture list. You might have the easier games first, the tougher games later, or the vice versa. So everyone has to have played everyone else twice to make it fair, so to speak. But by the same token, I think it would have been better all around that they say, look, we suspend the league. None of us have got a clue when they'll be able to restart. What we'll do is we'll suspend the league, or we'll take stock of the situation as it stands when life returns to some form of normality. Now, what I think was particularly appalling about this, obviously, the Worthing story, and they're top of the league, and they were on the verge of promotion. It's a wonderful story, the rise, what George Dowell has achieved with that football club over the course of the last few years. But there's frustrations in all sectors, in all parts of the country, teams on the verge of promotion, everything else. There's quite a dark side to this, in that people were speculating on social media saying, but in the league above us, one or two clubs might go bankrupt anyway, which may lead to an automatic promotion.
Whoa,
that would be a hollow promotion. That's not something to celebrate.
I don't think that happens. I think it's normally the other way around. I mean, Margate was saved twice. From going down to, I mean, we are as low now as we've ever been. If you look at the history of the club, but the point is, I think some clubs will go to the wall if this goes on for much longer, because you don't have the money, and unless you've got a very good benefactor. Like the guy you mentioned at Worthing, I mean, it's there comes a point where he thinks, well, I've put all this money in. I mean, how much more? No one's going to put more money in, not knowing when things are going to end. I don't know, and I can't see the government doing anything. I really can't.
I mean, for those who don't know, and I'm guessing most people listening won't know this, the story of Worthing was the club's owner, George Dowell. He played for the club up until about 10 years ago, and then. About 9 years ago, I think it was, rather, he was very badly injured in a car accident and was left paralysed from the chest down. And his compensation payment, he first of all, he set up a separate football club. And that was a very temporary thing. And then he actually bought Worthing and he started running it in a business-like way. Now, that the success, this has turned this into a movie, because obviously they're top of the league. They were due to get promotion around about now. They would have to have seriously messed up their last few games to not get promotion. They were top of the league, as you know, the Isthmian League. But in his case, they could turn that story into a movie quite easily. But to null and void the season, the fans have been robbed. He has been robbed. He's not as if he's got this endless big pot of money he can dip into. He has spent his money on that, and he was getting a good return. Now he's put day-to-day running of the club in the hands of others now. But it's just a case that there are so many. That's a particularly big story, if you like. But in leagues all across the pyramids and in the different English regions and beyond England as well, in the other nations of the UK, there are similar situations going on. And the FA, the thing is, the way they've done this, we'll do the lower end of the tier first, and we'll talk about the higher end later on. To me, that was crass as well, because they know at the FA that, certainly Liverpool, Manchester City, but even clubs at Championship level, League One, League Two, and beyond that, that's a matter for the EFL technically, I know, but there you go. They know that if they start making decisions like that, they can get very good lawyers, hotshot lawyers in thousands of pounds every day, and they can challenge these things in the courts. At the non-league level, they simply haven't got that sort of money.
Yeah, we did it once at Margate. We challenged someone about the ground grading, and anyway, that was we won that one. But I can talk about Newport County in a minute. But yes, it's quite honestly, the way I feel at the moment about Margate, I'm local here to Wingate and Finchley. Hendon's not too far away. Obviously Barnet and Enfield and these sorts of clubs. I mean, they're all. I mean, it's tricky. It's really tricky, and I think that, I don't know, perhaps it's a good thing. Perhaps it will just, perhaps it's like a war situation, and clubs just fold, and we'll just have to start again, and society will just take a huge knock, and football really isn't a priority.
I think that the truth of it is, Jeremy, is because none of us knows how long it's going to be before we're out of this, and realistically, bare minimum, we're looking at several months. And as you say, if there's going to be second, third waves of this, we could be in it for considerably longer. And I just think because we actually, as we've already discussed in this podcast, we know so little about how the virus works. We've just got to play this thing out for as long as it takes and take stock of the situation later on. Obviously, there will be issues. Let's say, for example, I know this is perhaps a little bit optimistic, but let's say we could in theory start the league again in late summer. There are certain players who'd be kicking off. I'm out of contract now. I was due to go here, there, and everywhere. I've made plans. Yeah, or at non-league level, at semi-professional level, they've made plans for their lives beyond this summer. So, for example, if you were planning on moving to another part of the country for a good personal reason or a work reason or a business reason, that is also up in the air. So there's all sorts of permutations, difficult situations with this. But I think what the FA has done, it was crass, it was insensitive, and there's a petition going round, I know, and I have actually signed it. Do think again about this.
I haven't seen it. If you could send it to me, I'd appreciate it.
I'd be delighted to do that. Yes, I think it's still open, that petition. No, it's due to close the next day.
But can I ask you a question? You were born and bred in Cardiff?
Yes, I was. Yeah.
Okay. So I understand you being involved, obviously getting involved with Cardiff City. But again, where are the biggest non-league clubs around Cardiff? This is my lack of geographic knowledge.
The situation in here is that in 1992, I think it was, until that point, the non-league clubs played in the English regional pyramid system. And then the Football Association of Wales chairman at the time, a guy called Alan Evans, used to call himself Secretary General. The title is now Chief Executive. In those days, it was Secretary General. He feared that FIFA would take away Wales's status as an independent country and forced all of us into a sort of United Kingdom type team or Great Britain type team. And he thought the way to alleviate that was to create a League of Wales. And he demanded, and he ruled with an iron fist in this in many ways. He said, if you're outside of the professional ranks, you have to join the League of Wales. Now, that annoyed people, the clubs, for two reasons. There was what we had, the irate eight, the 8 non-league clubs in Wales that really didn't want to join the League of Wales system for two reasons. One is that in terms of geography, Wales is an east-west country. The area around Newport, Cardiff and the valleys has economic links really with the west of England, the area around Gloucester and Worcester and places like that, where you can travel to within about an hour, as opposed to North Wales, because the terrain of Wales is there's not good transport links between North and South Wales. You have to go via Birmingham and up the roads through that way to get to North Wales. So in terms of like a non-league club like Merthyr Tydfil, for example, as it was then, now called Merthyr Town, travelling to Gloucester might take an hour and a half on a coach. Travelling to North Wales is 4 or 5 hours on a coach. Play your match, you might have to stay in a hotel overnight or travel all the way down and be absolutely knackered. Now, you do that 18, 19 times a season for a non-league club. That is a considerable expense. The other reason for not wanting to join the League of Wales is if you've got any ambitions whatsoever of ever making it as a professional club in the English pyramid, well, you're going to be shut out of it forever. Okay, the winners of the League of Wales get a place in the Champions League qualifiers. Second and third get in what we now call the Europa League. But if you ever had ambitions of making it in the English pyramid, you had no chance. Now, one of the irate 8 was what was called Newport AFC. The original Newport County went bust in the end of the 1980s. They played at Somerton Park. The fans pulled together, as very often happens when a club goes out of business. They reformed the club again from scratch. And they said, eventually, we will get ourselves back into the Football League, as was, now called the EFL. And then the Alan Evans situation happened in 92, 93, and Newport were one of the irate 8. And they were effectively shut out of playing matches in Wales. They had to play their matches in Worcester for a period. Alan Evans became a hate figure for Newport County fans. There was a big court case, and the irate eight gradually drifted down. There were 8 to begin with. Within about 2 or 3 seasons of the League of Wales being formed, one by one, most of them joined the English pyramid. The League of Wales. The ones that stayed in the English pyramid were Merthyr Tydfil, Newport County, Colwyn Bay up in North Wales. I think that was about it. I think we were down to 3 in the end. Now, Newport actually won their court case, and that meant they could play their matches in Wales again on Welsh turf, and they went to the Newport Athletic Stadium because they're all.
Yeah, I remember going there on 2 occasions. Yeah.
And by which time their old ground, Somerton Park, had been turned into a housing estate. They played at the Athletic Stadium for a number of years. They made their way up the pyramid into what we ended up calling the Conference, now called National League. And then eventually that story has a happy ending. They ended up back in the EFL, as we now call it, the Football League. And they actually renamed themselves Newport County. So they reverted to their old name. They now play at Rodney Parade Rugby Ground. And that's a particular story. And of course, they had that good FA Cup run a couple of years ago.
Yes.
Their matches were on national television, and we all know about that. I think they played Leicester City, and they won that game, and then they played Manchester City, and both those matches were televised. They ended up losing to Man City, didn't they? But so the reason being, you can see why those clubs, they didn't want to join the League of Wales, but they felt if you couldn't afford the court case that Newport County did, Newport AFC as it was at the time they did, you could see you could be strong-armed into joining the League of Wales. In the 1990s, Barry Town, who were one of the irate eight originally, became the dominant team in the League of Wales, and that led to some interesting European nights at Jenner Park in that period. And then into the early 2000s, John Fashanu bought the club, and then it ended up in bad hands after that, went out of business, and there's a YouTube documentary about how the club reformed. They're now back in.
I'll have to check that out.
Oh, it's a good one. Yeah, they ended up taking the FAW to court themselves about being allowed back into the Welsh pyramid system below what we now call the Cymru Premier, which is what the League of Wales was rebranded. And they were eventually allowed back in. But in terms of non-league, Merthyr Tydfil went bust, reformed as Merthyr Town. They still play at Penydarren Park. That's certainly the only South Wales team still playing in the English non-league pyramid system.
I remember Bridgend quite well, but
Bridgend ended up in the Welsh pyramid. They ended up. I think they may have been one of the irate eight to begin with. In fact, my old history teacher at school was a big Bridgend Town fan. They went bust. They've reformed as Pen-y-bont, which is just the Welsh word for Bridgend. It's the same thing, really. Yeah. They're in, I think, the 3rd tier now in the Welsh pyramid system. But and in the end, Alan Evans died about 8-9 years ago, and he gave an interview not long before he died. And he had actually gone to see when Newport County were back in the professional status. He went to a few matches at Rodney Parade Stadium. And he said, actually, I never wanted to annoy the club. I never wanted to annoy the fans. That's not what it was about. He really did feel that if he didn't get this League of Wales thing set up, FIFA was seriously considering stripping Wales of its national status. And
well, he may have had a point, but I can understand FIFA's point of view.
But he was just saying towards the end of his life, he wanted to build those bridges with Newport County fans and the club. And he went to a few matches when he was getting old, and he may have known he didn't have long to go. And he built those bridges as best he could. As you say, he didn't want to annoy anybody, but he felt he had to do it. And obviously, you've been following non-league football for many years. You've got memories of the Welsh clubs then.
Yes, I mean, there was a couple. I mean, most recently, there was the game at Hartsdown Park where Margate drew with Newport County 0-0 to win the Southern League, and I was on call with the I think it was the Daily Telegraph, or no, it was the Times actually. Anyway, and you phoned them up, and that was the first time Margate had won the Southern League since 1936.
Wow!
And I'm sitting there, and 2,500 people in there, nice big crowd from Margate, and yet you drive away, and there's no excitement, and sometimes I think we get. I think a lot of towns, I think, you may have like 95% of the population indifferent, 0.5% of the town's population hate them. And then you got about 4% armchair support and so on. And if you look at the crowds of, this is another great tragedy as well with non-league. The attendances are appalling, really, up and down the country. But the two specific games with Newport. So I remember the old Newport losing to Barnet in the FA Cup, like about 6-0 or something. When Barnet were in the Southern League and so on. But so more recently, with the 2 away games, I went to Newport, I drove, and it was tipping down. And it was tipping down.
Welcome to Wales, yes.
Welcome to Wales. You go across the bridge. Anyway, I got to the ground, and you get out, and it rained, and the ref just called the match off after about 15 minutes. And of course, as soon as he does, 5 minutes after players left, the rain stopped and it was fine. So I interviewed the manager interviewed the manager at Newport Railway Station. So that was a waste of a day. And then either the time before or the time after, I forget now, Margate turned up with the wrong colour shirts. And so we had to play in Newport County's away kit.
Yeah.
We had an away, and we were robbed of an away win there with some wrong decision. So my adventures into Wales weren't very interesting.
Yeah, so you've never experienced Jenner Park in Barry, then, have you?
No, I never. No, not as much as that, unfortunately. But it sounds an interesting place to go. Perhaps I should do that in my dotage. You know, Hereford.
It's worth it, yeah.
I know those guys at Hereford who are like sort of de facto Welsh people. Would
Edgar Street.
Been there a couple of times, and another. All right, they've reformed and everything now, but there is just so many clubs that have fallen by the wayside or have had difficulties, and this all started with colour television and football on TV, and you could trace it back to that.
Well, I'm a relative newcomer to football at semi-professional level. I got into it, and I followed it for years, but I only started attending matches when I started going to Barry Town towards the end of last year.
How far is Barry from Cardiff?
7-8 miles from where I am right now.
So that's your nearest non-league club then, or is it?
No, technically it'd be Cardiff Met, which is the club formerly known as Inter Cardiff, which reformed.
Ah, yes,
is now effectively a university club at Cardiff Met University. That's probably my nearest in geographic terms. That's on the opposite side of Cardiff to where I am now in the Kincoid area. There's a Jewish community in Kincoid, actually. It's the Cardiff Jewish community. They got a university campus there, and that's where Cardiff Met play their matches, apart from their European matches, which was played at the Cardiff Athletic Stadium because they got into Europa League this season. But no, Barry Town is 7-8 miles away. It's 15-minute journey on a train, if that. And you just take that walk from the railway station up to Jenner Park, which is actually a community facility, a community athletics ground. And they recently put this, what they call it, 3G pitches. The thing. Yeah.
What do you think of those?
Well, I don't like them at all, and I know the players don't like them, because what's happened there is that the council who own the facility said we've got to save a bit of money in terms of running costs, and they said this 3G pitch will save us X amount of money over 5 years. The first thing that meant is that, point one, there was a 9-lane athletics track around the outside. With the 3G pitch being laid, that's reduced it to 7 lanes. So the athletics track is now smaller, although from a fan's point of view, you're that little bit nearer to the pitch than you were before, which is something. Yeah.
Do you still need binoculars, though?
Kind of. It is a little bit like that, I've got to be honest.
Go.
And then the trouble with the 3G pitch is the bounce is absolutely awful. When that happens, but it could be worse. It could be rugby. Now, Sardis Road, Pontypridd rugby ground, they put a 3G pitch there, and that is actually very dangerous because you burn yourself playing rugby quite easily. And there's been some very, very nasty injuries of people burning themselves. There's a natural slide in rugby when you fall on the ground, score a try, what have you. That was actually dangerous, but in 3G pitch, in rugby, it should be banned. In football, it's a nuisance because the bounce is just so damn weird a lot of the time.
And you've got to replace it after 5 or 6 years anyway. But we had it in Margate 2 years ago. Yes, some matches were saved, I suppose. But I don't get down there very often. I'm more of an away. I'm the London branch, really. A few others.
Yeah.
And but it is still good fun going to. Hopefully you can come up to London one time. I mean, I just hope that everything's okay again, and we can. This year I've been to I haven't been to Enfield yet. I don't suppose I will, but Cheshunt, not very far away. Wingate and Finchley's around the corner. Hornchurch isn't too far away. They've got a very interesting ground. They've got an athletics pitch, track around their ground.
Yes, something about 3G pitches is that
Yeah.
at Worthing about a month and a half ago.
Yes, they had a problem, didn't they?
There was I was listening because my friend was commentating. James Easton, who works with us, he was commentating on that game. He and I podcast together quite often. Just the match had ended, and some idiot set off a flare that went on the 3G pitch and effectively burnt a hole in it. And as James said on commentary at the time, do you realise how much that's actually going to cost to repair? And in a non-league club, you need every penny you can get. And it's just people being stupid. So something like that, whereas grass would just regrow naturally over time.
Yeah.
That is actually a job that needs to be put right. And it's just horrendous that anyone would do that. But that is one of the flaws of 3G pitches. Yes.
Yeah, and the injuries as well. But look, it's the same for both sides. But yeah, I mean, years ago, Margate had a great pitch. Of course, it was all chalk. All right, it was a very, very bad, a bit like Barnet. It was not as bad as Yeovil's old ground, but there was a dip, and then eventually that the first layer of chalk was removed, and of course then you started to have problems.
Yeah. So I have to say, yes, games have been saved. In fact, the very first Barry Town match I went to, in fact, with James when he was down here in November of last year, he was the guy who got me into Barry Town. He said, because he's got into supporting Worthing, he said, let's see what the Welsh League is like, the Cymru Premier. We went to Barry Town on a Friday night. Yes, in all honesty, that match was probably saved because it was tipping down with rain that night. It was probably saved by a 3G pitch.
I could think of nothing better to go to Barry Town on a Friday night in January.
It was great. The rain was lashing, and
you'd have to pay me an awful lot of money to go to.
You'd love it because the thing is, there was a crowd of a few hundred of us at least. You've got a band at the back who were playing their instruments all the way through, making an absolute racket. Then you go in the bar, and even though you don't know anyone, everyone wants to talk to you.
It's really very good.
And you get this sense that, I suspect it's the same with all clubs at semi-professional level. There's an army of volunteers who all do their bit in their own little way to keep the whole thing going. And you get it the length and breadth of the country. And I just felt a sense of community, and I've been back, 3 or 4 times at least since then. And obviously, I've had my differences with Cardiff City Football Club in recent years, and there's an authenticity about it. There's a community feeling, and even if you hang around long enough for half an hour, 3/4 an hour in the club bar after the game, the players come in and they'll have a chat with you.
Yes, it's good, isn't it? I mean, I've been used to that for years now, and that's what you do. And you can speak to the manager, and when I was doing the radio for BBC Kent and everything. And you get a double whammy. You get to do your job, and you meet all the guys. And no, I enjoyed Margate's 3 or 4 years in the conference. But anyway, I just hope all these things will end up as being one big horrible memory. God knows what's going to happen.
It does feel as though we're going to be stuck with this for the foreseeable future. I'm afraid. I don't think there's going to be any easy or immediate way out. I do think that one long-term aspect of this is that because so many people are now working from home, and if it turns out this is possible, it may be that companies increasingly and businesses up and down the country decide, do we actually need all this office space? Or could we have an arrangement where our workers work from home, say 4 days a week, come in 1 day a week? I think a lot of businesses, if this is seen to be working, even something like the fact that we can record this podcast now with not exactly professional equipment, but with this will sound good enough. A lot of radio stations, for example, will be saying, can their presenters do their shows from home? Because I know a number of radio presenters that are doing exactly that right now for their own safety, because it's not safe for them to go into work. Will they need so many radio studios and stuff? And I think in a lot of sectors, people will be asking, do we actually need to bring our staff into work every day in future if this working from home experiment continues?
I wonder how it's going to affect football and other sports. Perhaps it won't. I don't know. Perhaps if people connect more with their local teams, perhaps it'll be a good thing. I don't know.
Well, I think going back to the point I was making a few moments ago about the FA, I think the most sensible thing is, yes, it's going to be very tough indeed. Let's take stock of where we are when we're seeing signs of getting out of this, because I think that's going to be some way off, and then we can have a sensible plan of action the other time. But I think the FA's announcement about the lower end of the pyramid, it was crass, it was insensitive, And it was actually insulting to clubs who have achieved great things this season. And so
I mean, look at those guys across the water in Jersey, and Barrow as well. I mean, who else? I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there are more examples.
Oh, there are up and down the country across the pyramid system.
I'm rather hoping Wingate and Finchley don't get relegated. So, I wish they probably could do, but I mean, we'll just have to wait and see. But I mean, it really is. I mean, I know the chairman at Hendon, and he's a worried man.
Yeah, as many of us are at the moment. So to conclude this podcast on an optimistic note, you've got many. Well, you've done many things with your live football commentator, conference host. This sales venture you've got going at the moment. Tell us about that. Give yourself a plug.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, I think a lot of people in sales. Selling has changed. I mean, excuse me. I mean, I must.
He's a busy man, folks. He's a
busy man.
Yeah. He's in.
Okay. All right. No worries. It's like any other sort of form of consultancy. Individuals and companies, sometimes lack confidence because just either lack the will to do things. Years ago, when I first started out, companies had sales forces and there was proper training. And I think the first thing that went with the downsizing of companies in the 1990s was training. And I don't mean just for sales companies. I'm talking about for any sort of training, particularly in retail. And I think there's a lot of people out there who don't know how to sell, and whether that's in the high street or over the phone, or whether it's business to business, Excuse me, I may have to take this.
Everyone wants to speak to you today.
They do indeed. Can we just hold the recording just for a moment?
Absolutely, we can. Okay.
Yes, I was saying, and people, and I think there's been an explosion in self-employment. So a lot of people who have been in business are now setting themselves up as coaches and facilitators and so on. I mean, I use the word sales mentor because I think if you're a mentor, you're someone who's there over a period of time, whereas a coach or a trainer is there for a short period of time. My particular take is this: there are two things to it. Selling has changed. People's over the last few years. Because of the internet, people's expectations are different. And we've also learnt more about how people think and how their brains work. So there's an element of psychology and brain science coming into this. And, you just have to be so good nowadays to sell and to be successful in business. So how you communicate is going to be successful. Your product has to be successful. Your pricing has to be right. Your offering has to be right. And all these things go into the mix. And success in business, Marcus, is all about getting lots and lots of little things right. And so it's when I say, you've got to get everything right, it can be a huge expense depending on the sector you're in. But aim for excellent and be excellent as much as you possibly can. And whether that's in radio broadcasting or being a sales mentor or a football club chairman.
You have to ask yourself every day and every week, what am I going to do better today, better than I did yesterday? And ask that. My own experience of sales have been largely negative. I was only involved in it in quite a short time. There was this awful, frankly, door-to-door sales firm working on commission. And I know there's branches of these up and down the country, or certainly were at the time when I was involved in the summer of 2006, trying to make a few quid when I was not long out of university. And it was just horrendous. You'd be given a product to sell. In fact, I was only there a matter of days, and it turned out most people were only there a matter of days. And you
what product was it?
For us, we were trying to get people to join a well-known broadband company. And we had to.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
That was it for us. Another day you might be trying to sell them satellite television. Another day you'd have big box of knives and forks and what have you, and have to try and sell them cutlery. But when I was there, it was a well-known broadband firm. Yeah. We had to knock on people's doors, and there was a very odd thing, because if they were over 70, you weren't even allowed to even try and sell it to them. So you'd knock on their door. And I just remember there was this old dear, and I could tell she was mentally still very alert. There was nothing wrong with her. She was just old. And my colleague actually did the talking. He said, "Hello, we're just checking to make sure everything's all right with the phone. Everything all right with the phone? Is it, love? Is it okay?" I thought, this just sounds like the most dodgy conversation ever. You've knocked on her door after everything's all right with the phone. She's probably wondering if someone's gone round the back door and is breaking into her house right now, because it did sound a bit like that. But I just remember this was the reason I'm telling you this story now is because the standard script when we were knocking on doors, we did one day in Cardiff, one day in the Welsh Valleys, and then I quit. That was it, yeah. And you'd knock on doors, and it was so scripted and so staid. Yeah. And we were told not to deviate from this script. Well, it was very sort of not me, the script, anyway. I'd rather work out what sort of person I'm speaking to and adjust myself accordingly. But we were told to stick to this script. And it just sounded a little bit too sort of not very authentic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's right. You see, I mean, that is the worst excesses of what I was talking about. I mean, when I started with a very well-known office equipment organisation, multi-million-pound international company, but you're selling fax machines and office copiers and this sort of stuff, but it was always product-led. You're always there. You're always trying to sort of shoehorn your way in, and there's nothing wrong with being a disruptor. And there's some good business was done, and I think it is very, very good. But as time has gone on, people have become inured to sales tactics because people are smart and people are clever, and you can't treat people in the same way. So nowadays it's about you've got to be more of a psychologist and more of an educator nowadays. And the best salespeople always have been that sort of way. They just understand what people want, when they want them, and how they want them. And you have to use a bit of psychology. A lot of my thinking comes from the world of behavioural economics, and this is how, on a more transactional basis, if you look at how Amazon and how their website works, they know how people's minds work and how their brains work, and in a way you could say they're being manipulated, but it works okay online. But when it's a business-to-business arrangement and it's face-to-face, you really have to be on your mettle and know your stuff. And particularly at the moment, I'm not saying selling is out the window, but you have to be aware. You have to be very supportive, very sympathetic, very empathetic to people's needs, and from my point of view, help them through the morass of problems they're facing at the moment, so I can come out the other side. Look, well, here's my sales plan. This is what I'm going to say to my clients, and try and do that. And as I said at the top of the show, just be as helpful as you possibly can.
Yeah, because I think back to that experience, that very brief experience I had in the summer of 2006. And that was just commission only, hard sell, a lot of very young people working there. It was quite I could tell it was a nasty working environment. And what it was, I think it was on day 3, I just woke up and I looked at the cricket score. It was, I can't remember, England against, I think it was Pakistan they were playing that summer 2006. I looked at the scorecard before I went to bed and I thought it's going to be a good final day. I woke up and I thought, you know what, because it was just so hard to make any money in that place anyway, and it was such a nasty environment. And it was a cult-like environment. I thought I'd rather watch the cricket today. I'm not going to make much money anyway, and that's what I did.
Good for you. I mean, look, it didn't fit your values. Sometimes those environments were quite good as a learning, and I learned a tremendous lot the first 10 years or so. But there were some good professional guys around at the time too. So look, you live and learn. And I've now put all that together. So
yeah, this was a very much, and in fact, there was a documentary, and this was the dying days of ITV regional television. ITV only really do regional news now, except in Wales, where there's still a bit of regional programming left. ITV West, that about a month after I left, did a hidden camera documentary, their equivalent branch in Bristol of the company I was working for in Cardiff. Sales, and they sent one of their staff into there, and it was exactly the same. There was a sort of a pyramid system where the boss, they answered to a larger group of and then the boss would employ lots of mainly very young staff, knowing full well most of them would quit within a matter of days. And there was actually, I read a blog article about this fella, and he got manipulated by this firm. And he was, it turned out that he was being paid something like £3 an hour if you aggregated it out, because it was that hard to make money there. And it was affecting his relationship with his girlfriend. And because he wasn't arriving home until 8, 9, 10 at night, because you didn't start till late mornings. And that period when people were coming home for their tea, that was effectively your key period door-to-door sales. And so he was coming home late night, and this was, and he was coming home from work, and he'd tell his girlfriend, "Oh, I've had a great day today." And it was all this sort of, you get all these high-powered pep talks at the start, the end of the day from the boss in the office, and it was very cult-like in that sense.
Yeah.
And she was saying, "Look, can't you see through this? You're saying what a great bunch of guys it is you're working with. You're making hardly any money, and neither is anybody else. You're being manipulated." And in the end, the girlfriend's father said, "Look, we actually like your boyfriend. He's been good for you." And he spoke to this bloke, and he was about 20, 21 years of age. He said, "Look, you work out how many hours you've worked for this company over the course of the last few months. I will give you the minimum wage, which is about £5 an hour at the time, for every one of those hours you work for that company. You said you were saving up for an Xbox. I'll buy you an Xbox. I'll even buy you a few games. But for crying out loud, for my daughter's sake and for the sake of your own sanity, please leave that company. They are manipulating you. They are using you." And he, to start with, he said, no, I'm going to keep working for them. And this was, his girlfriend's father had made him a damn good offer there. But he kept working with them. And then about a month later, he's finally accepted the offer, and he realized what happened. And he was embarrassed by the fact that he was sucked in by it. Now, most people don't get sucked in by it. They were gone within a matter of days. But that is the worst excesses of sales.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what have I done over the years? There was one period. God knows. I don't know why I did it. A friend of mine, it was selling. They don't do it anymore, but it was actually quite good because I did pay you proper money. It was selling accountancy courses. Yeah, door to door, face to face, and the guys who really worked at it made the money. And in some respects, that's what you want. But that's what everybody should be doing. Those of us who want to do well in sales, you have to work. There is no substitute for hard work, Marcus. And
this is true. I've got nothing against incentivizing people to do well and encouraging people to do well and giving them the necessary training to go up a level. And when you reach this level, you get a reward and so forth. But there are people, certainly in that era, 2006, and that ITV West documentary backed up at this point, and the various blog articles I read, like the story I just told you. Yeah. There was a very crass end of things at that time. I don't know if it's still about to the same extent, but the very crude end of door-to-door sales. And a lot of people were being manipulated at that point. And that really is the low end of things, if you like. I'm not saying the whole industry is like that. It's not. I also think chuggers need to be a bit more careful with some.
Oh yes, yeah.
You get it, and it's the same in Cardiff. It's the same everywhere. Yeah. They come up to you in this very sort of over familiar way, and that's what. That one came up to me about a year ago, and I was walking quickly because I had to be somewhere, and he said, "Central Card, hi, you look like a nice friendly fellow." Now most people who meet me would probably think that, and I just said, "No, I'm not. Get lost," because that's not the way to start a conversation with somebody you've never seen before in your life. And, you start with, I know, good morning, have you got a spare moment, or words to that effect. You don't start like that. You've got this sort of over familiarity. I'm also aware that, particularly the ones who are trying to get me to sign up for a monthly charity donation, the first thought that gets in my head, if you're from, I don't know, this homeless charity or whatever, what sort of cut are they getting and what's in it for them? Why don't
exactly. Well, it's all charities, and it's horrendous, really, isn't it? There was one bloke in Baker Street. He actually blocked my path. I said, "You got 5 seconds to get out of the way."
Yeah.
Otherwise, I call the police.
It can be like that. I don't think it's quite that intense in Cardiff.
No. Of course, going back years and years, it was a double glazing sales and had bad reputation. Estate agents. Again, when I first started, it was the Bermuda Triangle of dodgy people: photocopier salesmen, double glazing, and members of Parliament. And estate agents. To be delete or whatever. But unfair, really. But no, some guys are very good and very professional and do well.
So, in conclusion, then, where can we learn more about you and what you're up to?
Yes, you can go to www.thesalesrainmaker.co.uk.
Say that again.
The Sales Rainmaker. That's all one word.
.co.uk.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Jeremy, you've been an absolutely fantastic guest.
Thank you.
It's been good to chat with you. And hopefully we'll hear you again on the Talk Podcast platform before too much longer.
Lovely. All right. Thanks, Marcus.
My thanks to Jeremy, and my thanks to you for listening. And don't forget, if you're looking for something interesting to listen to at the moment, there's a wide range of podcasts on all sorts of topics on talkpodcast.com. You can also listen via iTunes and Spotify. Just do a search for Talk Podcasts and you'll find it. Do stay safe at this difficult time, and we'll see you again soon.